The 4% rule is one of the most popular rules in finance, proposed by Bill Bengen in the Journal of Financial Planning in 1994. Bill was an aeronautical engineer, originally wanted to join the US space program to become an astronaut. Unfortunately, it didn't work out, so having been knocked back on that heroic journey, he settled for the next best thing, to become a financial planner. Come on. Anyway, what was good about this rule is that it is evidence-based. It showed that an investor could have picked any time in modern history of finance over a 30-year period that you could withdraw 4% of the balance, adjust those withdrawals for inflation, and not run out of money. So if you have $1 million, you could safely withdraw $40,000 each year for inflation without running out of money over 30 years. It is robust because it stood up across periods such as the Great Depression, but in this video, I'm going to tell you why I believe that this rule just doesn't work in reality, and why it's totally unrealistic to use this as a guide, and what I think you should do instead. So let's first just get into some of the technicals which are often missed when considering this rule. So the 4% rule was based purely on the American stock market. In 2011, Wade Pfau revised this to look at the international perspective on developed markets instead of just the US market. He found that the sustainable withdrawal rate of 4% was actually exceeded in Canada, Sweden and Denmark. However, for other countries, the sustainable withdrawal rate was much less than 4%. The most unfortunate case was a retiree, being a Japanese person in 1940, whose maximum sustainable withdrawal rate was a miserably low 0.47%. 6 other countries experienced withdrawal rates below 3%. So why does this matter and why should you care? Well, because you either have to assume the US's outperformance compared to the global market will continue, and that's a hell of a bet because you are guessing that that dominance will continue in the future, or if you're slightly more sensible and you consider a globally diversified portfolio, you'd need to factor in that the 4% rule doesn't stand up to this. And another point for reference, for retirement, as I mentioned in my last video, if you retire at 60, especially if you're a couple retiring, there's a very strong chance that your retirement may last longer than 30 years. So that alone means that the time frame over which the 4% rule was designed wouldn't stand up. And for those using it for really early retirement, such as over a 50-year time horizon, it definitely wasn't designed for that. So those who are using it for financial independence retire early, potentially are in some nasty surprises. It also doesn't include the impact of fees, which can have a drag on the withdrawal rate. And that drag isn't just one-to-one. It also doesn't include the impact of taxes. So basically, the 4% rule doesn't work if you're using it with pension assets in drawdown. So there is going to be a tax drag on the withdrawals. However, look, while I think all these points are important, I actually think they are missing the biggest thing. So let's forget all those issues I've just raised, and let's imagine that you are sitting down with a financial planner and you say this. So I've heard a lot about the 4% rule and, I'd like to use it in my retirement. I've got £1 million sat in an ISA. How weird, you've got nothing in pensions. Anyway, the 4% rule states that we withdraw 4% of the original balance, so that's £40,000 per year, adjusted for inflation. But there's quite a few important things to consider. Look, I don't want to hear about it. Sounds great. Why do I sign?
Got S&P record high, NASDAQ up 5 in a row, first time since January, VIX below 6.
Wow, the last 5 years have been amazing. I'll be honest, I was quite happy with taking £40,000 per year. But now there's so much more than I thought I could do. There's things I'd like to do, give a bit more to my kids, a few charities, maybe even a few more holidays. Well, here's the problem. The rules we agreed to, that's 4% of the original balance. If we start taking higher amounts, we have no idea how this is all going to pan out. I mean, it completely goes against the framework that we agreed, and if we abandon that, we might as well not have bothered using it at all. Even though it looks like I'm going to have way more money than I need. Yes, if you wanted to use the framework we agreed. I've been watching Bloomberg all day and I'm convinced that it's the apocalypse. We need to make some changes. I've cancelled my holidays. I just don't want to have to go back to work. Don't have to make any changes. We agreed to a framework and I am convinced it's mathematically sound. Honestly, look, I appreciate your faith in the model, but it just doesn't feel right. My balance is so much lower than I thought it would be at this stage. Here is your £40,000 per year. Will you buy my shoes? Okay, so I hope we can agree that the 4% rule, while being technically excellent, doesn't actually work in reality. And this is why I would never use it for someone's retirement. The thing is with real financial planning is that we need to find that sweet spot between a financial decision and a human element. One person's completely reasonable compromise may be sacrilege to someone else. There's also an underappreciated aspect which comes with this as well, which is underspending. And, it's just the other side of the retirement income coin. I personally don't believe it's a good result for a client to be the richest person in the graveyard. We have to achieve a retirement of dignity and independence, but with that, to make sure they actually enjoy the money they've worked hard to build. And that's why we can't look at either side as a success if you leave too much money or whether you run out of money. But just before I bash the 4% rule too much, there are some things that are very good about the 4% rule, which is that as a general rule of thumb, it's something useful to work towards. If you have no idea how much you should be saving and you use that 4% rule as a guide, you probably won't be far off where you need to be. So it's a decent place to start on how much you should be putting away. So just before I show you what the professionals do for retirement planning, please do consider liking and subscribing, as it helps immensely, not only so I know to make more content like this, but also helps me get more of this content out to lovely people like you. Okay, so let's look at proper planning. And this has nothing to do with the maths. It has to do with the human aspect of money. Hopefully, as I've shown, ultimately the 4% rule is a one-size-fits-all solution to a problem that needs a person-specific approach. So how can you use a framework like this to know roughly how much money will last? Which takes account of historical performance and different asset classes all over the world, what you're invested in, and also factors in a more individual approach. It also needs to include things like state pensions kicking in, looking at various tax approaches, make sure we've factored in that round the world trip, or maybe the house deposit gift for the kids. And this is what professionals do. They are likely to use cash flow modelling, which I'm just going to show you a brief snippet of now. And there are two main types to bear in mind. The first is deterministic, where the modelling is pretty much in a straight line. And this is useful because it's a very simple way to understand and explain, because you can show someone's retirement journey like this. The downside is that, as we all know, returns don't move in a straight line. So we have to consider other things like sequence risk, which I mentioned in my last video. The second main method of cash flow modelling is stochastic. And this uses a lot of mathematical modelling and it creates a probability assessment. It's much better theoretically, but you could also argue it's not quite as easy to understand. So the one I'm going to show you, which is Timeline, I personally really like. It uses data over 100 years of economic history. In fact, its founder wrote the excellent book, Beyond the 4% Rule, which I suggest giving a read. So how the professionals do it is that we firstly look and understand what your personal financial position and goals are, including things that are deeply important to achieve, what your assets are worth, what you're invested in, and see how likely the plan is to reach sustainable income level or never running out of money based on what you've got. We then assess how it fits into an overall financial plan. And most importantly, we need to also understand what you want to achieve, what are your hopes, your dreams, your goals, what the money is there for at the end of the day. We then analyse all this based on what you're invested in, and we can make improvements based on the tax position or maybe even the asset allocation based on our experience and also our training. And then from there, we can look at various options and withdrawal structures and be active how we manage this. And there are so many retirement income planning techniques I could go over, but let's just have a look at some of the levers. One is the Guyton inflation adjustments, where basically what we would do, we had a look at the sustainability of income. If the market has declined that year, we don't adjust the following year for inflation. Or maybe we can look at using what's called a boundaries withdrawal strategy. So how this works is that if the withdrawal rate has increased perhaps because of a market decline, if that's gone up, we agree to cut the withdrawals following on from a certain percentage. And if this was the plan, it would kind of look like talking through what would be fair compromises and understanding your expenditure. The reason why these boundary strategies can be really useful is instead of tying ourselves to the mast of 4% withdrawals at all time forever, we say, okay, well, if the withdrawal rate changes over your retirement, what we can do is we can have a look at taking an adaptive approach to withdrawing your expenditure. And we can project forward and then look at all types of market scenarios based on if we did that, which can greatly increase the probability of never running out of money, but also not having too much money at the end. It basically adds another lever of control. The key benefit of this is it's about a framework, not only for the plan, but also what happens if things don't go to plan. And it can go the other way around to increase withdrawals if things go a lot better than expected. We can then put this all together through modelling so that we've got a framework which is based on over 100 years of economic history. Now, no model or planning can predict the future, but if you know that your plan would have stood up to whether you'd been retiring in the Great Depression and going across 2 world wars, how would that make you feel as far as peace of mind? Anyway, look, I hope you found that useful, and hopefully I've gone over some of the mistakes potentially of using the 4% rule as the guide for your retirement. Anyway, I've also gone over 7 critical pension mistakes in this video that a lot of people don't know about. So if you are considering retiring, you should really watch this video. This has been Principles Personal Finance. I appreciate you watching. See you next time.